Now, having grown up in the country, we often went to the meat processor to get our beef. And the freezer room, the locker room, had big hooks that would go right into a slab of beef and leave it hanging there as it was cut into their right pieces. Amos is giving us a very vivid image of these women that first I might have thought were devoted to God. But he says the time is coming when they will be butchered. The walls that protect Samaria will be torn down. And there will be gaps in the wall so big that you could drag a human body. But it gets worse. He says those bodies that are dragged outside of the gates will be taken out into the country and just dumped. But some will be left to just rot on the streets. And this is pushing it a little bit, but it certainly gives it an image. What if Amos was saying something like this? Some of you, your bodies will lie there and rot and decay. And fishermen will bait their hooks with small pieces of your fat. Women who didn't think of others. Behind the scenes, the prophet says, it wasn't just that they didn't think of others, but they actually oppressed the poor. They oppressed the poor. They crushed the needy. They made life difficult for others, ignored the plight of others. It's sort of like, if you've ever seen a stampede of cows, they aren't concerned about anybody but themselves. And they step right over people and on people. You ever been like that? The Holy Week, as those final days of Jesus are called, the Holy Week is a time for us to carefully examine our commitment to God, our understanding of God. This is a time when we remember that the pressures get great, that the most dedicated disciples will deny knowing Him, that some of those semi-dedicated disciples will actually betray Him, and that most everyone will run in fear, not trusting Him. We become like the stampede of cattle. Not thinking of others, thinking of a self-serving attitude. Jesus died on the cross because self-serving people who don't think of others are doomed. Verses 4 and 5. Go to Bethel and sin. Go to Gilgal and sin yet more. Bring your sacrifices every morning, your tithes every 3 years. Burn leavened bread as a thank offering and brag about your free will offerings. Boast about them, you Israelites, for this is what you love to do, declares the sovereign Lord. The walls were not going to protect the Israelites any longer. Amos is looking at that time when those walls are going to be compromised. And there will be no safety in the city, no life left in the city. And the people were looking at Amos and saying, so if that's true, what do you propose that we do? And at this point, Amos is a little bit irritated. And he says, I tell you what, why don't you go to your holy cities to sin? Just continue as you are. He actually invited them to go to church to sin, knowing that their worship was an affront to God, knowing that it wasn't genuine, knowing that they weren't giving their best, knowing that they really weren't going to do anything that put them out. Now, flip the calendar forward. Let's go down the road 700 years. It's the last week in the earthly life of Christ. The mindset hasn't changed in spite of all that's happened. What did Jesus say about people with a self-serving attitude? Luke 7:44 and following. Then he turned to the woman and said, or toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not kiss me, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet." Simon had merely gone through the motion of inviting Jesus into his home. But it was obvious as Jesus looked at the situation and Simon remained seated, never provided Jesus with the things that were normal. Things like, "May I take your coat? May I have the servants to wash your feet?" The typical greeting of, "Bless you, my brother," with a hug, a kiss on either cheek. Simon sat there with an attitude, and it became worse. Because as Jesus did what Jesus was called to do, Simon and the others were very critical. And Jesus said, "Simon, what's wrong? You did not wash my feet. You did not give me a kiss. You did not anoint my head." Jesus spoke to the attitudes of those who are self-serving. He spoke to those people who ignore the plights of others. He told the story of the rich man and Lazarus, and a tremendous, powerful story. It's interesting that we know the name of the poor man, but we don't know the name of the rich man. And he totally ignores the plight of Lazarus. Luke 16:23-24. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in the fire." And you know the answer. His cries went unheeded. His needs went unmet. Jesus, through the Gospels, is saying to us, if we do not meet the needs of those about us in whatever way we can, be they spiritual needs which can be met through church or through a Christian relationship, be they physical needs for water or food or shelter, then neither will God meet our needs. What did Jesus say about people who are doomed because they do not help others and even become obstacles? Luke 11:52, "You yourselves have not entered the kingdom." If we do not help other people, that's an indication that we really are not living in Jesus Christ. If we are not living in Jesus Christ, we are as lost as the worst sinner in the world. The scripture continues, you yourselves have not entered the kingdom, and you have hindered those who were entering. In other words, we've made it difficult for others. Revelation 20:15 says, if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. There is a punishment that goes with not receiving Jesus Christ.